It does feel at the moment like every other new electric car is, one way or another, a milestone in the transition to a plug-in world. But the new Kia EV6 is a big step change for Kia as it moves upmarket and starts to take on the likes of Audi, BMW and, of course, Tesla. This is not just any Tesla either. This is the Model Y, which we've been waiting for, it feels like, for absolutely years to come over from America. Because of course we've already got the Model 3, it's one of the most popular cars in the UK, in Western Europe and in America. It's been a total hit, but I think a lot of people have found that it's not quite practical enough as a family car. And so we have the Model Y, which is the SUV version. Same platform. This has got a range of 315 miles. It's only available as a long range dual motor, which is 4-wheel drive. You can't get the cheaper standard range version that you can get in the Model 3. However, for that, I still feel like you're getting a fair amount of car, and it's certainly already looking to be very popular. Our friends at Tesla suggested that a cheaper standard range version of the Model Y is unlikely to make it to the UK. But the good news is that Tesla's finance deals tend to be very competitive, although those are still yet to come as well, since Tesla has launched the Model Y over here on a cash-only basis, initially at least. The Kia, on the other hand, well, it's a really interesting thing. It's quite a bit cheaper than the Model Y, it has to be said. Starts from £41,000, but for that you're talking about a rear-wheel drive car with a range of 328 miles. Most people are certainly going to go for a mid-spec GT line and quite probably for the 4-wheel drive, which has an official WLTP range of 314 miles. And it must be said, doesn't really have the same performance as the Tesla. You can also add a bit more equipment to the Kia, whereas the Tesla is quite highly equipped as standard. So like for like, I still think people are really going to be comparing these two. I think it's a really good comparison to see which one is going to be the better family car and which one is going to be the best executive car. It's also interesting to see that the EV6 is showing how Kia's got real aspirations to go up market. The interior feel, all sorts of aspects of this car, not only the fact that they are actually bringing out a high performance GT model next year, which is going to be right up there with both the Tesla Model 3 and Model Y performance models in terms of its pace and I suspect in terms of its pricing. Now, don't think you're going to get away with it. You've got to do all that like and subscribe stuff. So like the video, subscribe to the Car Gurus UK YouTube channel, and of course turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of our lovely videos. Go for the Model Y and you are getting quite a bit more space than you do in the EV6. Mostly, it has to be said, in the boot, because this has definitely got a bit more of a feel of a proper SUV to it than the Kia, which feels like it sort of treads a line between a hatchback and an SUV. You do get this powered tailgate as standard as well. In fact, about the only thing that's optional on this car, which is a long range, is that white interior. So you have got a massive boot in here. You've got deep cubbies either side, a really kind of deep well of space underfloor storage here. Of course, you've got the front boot, or frunk as it's become known. It should be a fruit really in the UK, shouldn't it? Which is great for storing your cables so that you don't have to lug the dog out of the boot just to plug the car in. On top of that, in the Model Y as standard, you get these electrically toppling rear seats, which is really good. And that extends so you get a nice flat load bay. So it really is a properly practical family SUV. The cabin in the Tesla is as minimalist as it gets. There isn't even a speedo behind the steering wheel, the air vents are hidden away in the horizontal gap across the dash, and they're controlled through the touchscreen. As is everything else, of course, even the steering wheel and wing mirror adjustment. Tesla did, after all, pioneer the idea of having all of the car's controls hidden in one large touchscreen. Of course, you get nav, automatic over-the-air software updates, music streaming and more, although you will have to pay £10 a month for that live traffic update and music streaming after the first year in the Model Y. The screen itself has great graphics and response times. It's good enough that you probably won't even mind the lack of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The Kia EV6 is quite a similar size to the Model Y in terms of its length, so they're both around about 4.7 metres long. The Kia's a little shorter, but it is a brand new platform bespoke for electric cars. It's the same platform as the Hyundai Ioniq 5, of course, and that means that Kia can put the wheels right out at the far corners of the car, and that pays off in terms of the interior space. So you do get a really decent sized boot. Got a good floor space. It is, let's face it though, it's just smaller than in the Model Y. It's a bit shallower. You do get underfloor storage, but this too is quite shallow. You get sort of two levels, little tiny cubby down there. And you do get front storage as well. Again, quite a bit smaller than the front storage that you get in the Model Y. So I think basically it's good, fine as a family car, but definitely not at the same standard as the Model Y. The only thing I would say is that you do get this load bay cover, and you don't get a load bay cover in the Model Y. You get privacy glass but no load bay cover, and that might be a factor for some. You do also have to go for quite a high spec EV6 to get a powered boot lid, which you get standard on the Tesla. The second that you slide into the Kia EV6, it definitely feels like more of a conventional car, I think, than the Model Y. And that's not to say that it's short on tech at all, because it's not. I think it's just the layout in general, this sort of raised centre piece, it all just feels a bit more like a normal executive car as we know it. But like I said, you can't criticise Kia for the tech that they fit in here. So they've got this lovely curved screen up here. The touchscreen in the middle is your portal to pretty much all of the functions that you're going to want. You've got your Apple CarPlay, your Android Auto, your nav. You've really got everything you want. And on top of that, you have also got shortcut buttons down here. But, slightly confusingly, this doubles up as well as your climate control switches. So it's good that you don't have to control the climate through the touchscreen, or you can actually if you want to. But I would say it's a little bit of a faff having to sort of swap between these two functions down here when you're driving. It's a bit of a small switch, so kind of clever, but also maybe not that practical. Even so, that's all good, really easy to use, and I'd actually go so far as to say this is pretty much, I think, the best system out there, maybe barring BMWs, in terms of just ease of use, when you just get straight into it and everything's kind of where you expect it to be. I'd like a home button when you're in Apple CarPlay to get back to the car's main central screen. That's my only criticism. But generally I really like it. You've got your wireless phone charging here, the seat's really comfy, you get adjustable lumbar on every EV6. It's just generally a very nice place to sit, very different to the Model Y, but in its own way, I think just as good and just as comfortable. You won't find any cars that charge faster than these two at this sort of price range. The Tesla Model Y long range will charge at up to 210 kilowatts, or even a little bit faster if you go for the performance model, while the Kia EV6 gets faster charging courtesy of its 800 volt electrical system. So if you plug into an ultra rapid 350 kilowatt charger, then you'll get an 80% battery in around about 20 minutes in the Kia, or half an hour in the Model Y. Mind you, finding a charger capable of those speeds may be easier if you're in the Tesla, since you'll have access to the excellent supercharger network, which the Kia doesn't, for now at least, since there are rumours of Tesla opening up its chargers to other manufacturers in late 2022. I'm going to start in the Kia because this is such a significant car, not just for Kia, but I think just generally in terms of our transition to electric cars. I think this represents how new brands can really disrupt some of those established alternatives. Both the kind of big German premium makers, Mercedes and BMW and Audi and all of that stuff. It's really impressive in terms of the way it drives too. This is very much a more sort of sporting, executive feeling car than the Hyundai Ioniq, which feels quite a bit heavy and kind of sort of floaty. This feels a bit more, it's got a bit more vim and vigour to it, this, you know. It has got your drive modes on the steering wheel, of course, you can stick it in sport, and even in normal actually, the Kia feels quite well tied down, so body control is pretty good. For all that, ride comfort actually not bad at all. It can get a little bit brittle over mid-corner bumps, but generally not bad. This is the rear-wheel drive model, which has a 0 to 62 time of 7.3 seconds. And I mean, blimey, that sounds really lazy compared to the Tesla, doesn't it? But you can get the four-wheel drive version of this, which does 0 to 62 in just over 5 seconds. So it's much closer to the Tesla in that regard. And don't forget, they are bringing out that GT model next year, which has got like 577 brake horsepower. I mean, what is that amount? That's a crazy amount of power. So that's going to be really interesting. But in the meantime, even the rear-wheel drive model, the performance is fine on the Kia. Even the mid-range picks up really nicely. More than happy merging onto fast motorways, overtaking all of that stuff. It's really nice. Even in eco, actually, throttle response is fine. It's fun. It really is fun, the EV6. And it feels, do you know what? It feels pretty spot on for what you'd want from an executive coupe crossover, hatchback thing, whatever this might be. It's very, very well judged. The brake regeneration in the Kia is really good as well. So you've got control with the paddles here. Now you have got no less than 4 different levels of brake regen, and you've also got an automatic mode on top of that. So you can choose to turn off the regen altogether and it just coasts for as long as you want it to. Coast for miles actually if there's nothing in front of you. Then you've got level 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 is very heavy, and you put it into 4 and it bings up with iPedal, which is effectively Kia's one pedal driving mode, which is sort of Nissan pioneered in the Leaf really. And that means that around town, when you lift off the throttle, the car brakes very heavily automatically, gathers as much energy as it possibly can, and that means that you barely need to touch the brake pedal at all. But the joy of having it all on the paddles, on the steering wheel, is that you can then change that when you get out onto faster country roads and this kind of thing, and it gives you full control over it. Whichever of those modes that you might choose, it always bleeds in quite smoothly. I really like it in auto mode, and I like the fact that also you can stick it in auto so that it's sensing when there's another car ahead and perhaps increasing the brake regen to keep that distance apart, and you learn to rely on that quite quickly. But you can also choose different levels within auto mode, so you can choose how heavily it's going to brake automatically. It sounds very complicated, it's not. Now, that's the way it drives, i.e. comfortable, quite fun, could steer better, but ultimately actually definitely one of the more involving of the electric cars that you can buy at this price. And I would include things like the e-tron Q4 in that, I have to say. I think this has got a bit more gumption to it. But visibility to the rear three quarters in this car is really quite poor. That's not good. In fact, the whole cabin feels a bit dark, so I don't think that's great, especially comparing it to the Model Y. This feels really quite, very dark, given how light and airy that feels. I know that that's got the white interior on it, but it's definitely a thing, so visibility could be better. As for real-world driving range in the Kia, well, we're impressed. It seems to do an easy 250 miles to a charge, even on fairly fast motorway runs and with fairly middling temperatures. So in the summer, it's quite likely that you'll see close to that official range of 328 miles in the rear-wheel drive model that we have here. Now, you do get semi-autonomous drive modes as well, so you get your adaptive cruise control, and then you've got a button on here which puts it into this sort of semi-autonomous mode so that it will do the stop and go in the traffic. It's got the lane keep and all of that. It's actually one of the slicker systems. It's nowhere near as advanced as the Teslas, I would say that, but it is very good. I think it's actually one of the better of the semi-autonomous drive modes that you can get in this class. And I really like the fact that you've got the lane keep assist button on the steering wheel, so you can turn off the lane keep assist really easily just by holding this button down on the steering wheel. And that sounds like a really small kind of detail, but if you live in the countryside, which I do, actually lane keep assist can sometimes be really intrusive. Sometimes it's great on the motorway, don't mind it on the motorway at all. Sometimes if you've got solid white line down a narrow road, it's trying to steer you into oncoming traffic all the time, and being able to turn it off really quickly and easily on the steering wheel like this, I think that's great. It should be on every car, in my opinion. Anyway, that is it. The Kia EV6 is a lovely thing. Let's see what the Tesla's like. As for the Tesla, well, Tesla is famous for the efficiency of its electric cars, and the Model Y doesn't disappoint. We also saw an easy 250 miles in the Model Y, and if anything, it's a slightly more efficient car than the Kia. So, the Model Y then, do you know what? The first thing that I felt about this car, and I drive EVs a lot, and I drive EVs that are more powerful than this and faster than this, and there's something about the Tesla power, the Tesla sort of power delivery, that just makes it feel a bit bananas, do you know? I mean, this is 4.8 seconds to 62. It feels faster than that. It's got that proper gut-wrenching acceleration. It's, I mean, wow, in a family SUV, it's just, well, it's unnecessary, but it is good fun, isn't it? I mean, that proper kind of point and squirt performance is just remarkable. It's one of the best things about EVs. I just love it. It's really cool. What I would say is that the first thing I took away from this car was the performance. The very next thing I took away from this car, having driven it for not that long before we've done this test, is that the ride is not ideal. So this test car is on 20-inch wheels. You can have it on 19s as standard, and I think that's definitely wise, because it must be said that ride comfort just isn't, it's not that great. It just picks up all of the bumps in the road, particularly kind of high frequency ones. Bigger bumps is fine, but little bumps like this, you get it through the rear axle in particular, and it kind of really seems to unsettle the car. And it's quite noisy suspension too. So it is something that kind of really intrudes a lot of the time on UK roads. The handling though in the Tesla is actually, it's really good, you know. So the steering's nice and linear, it's more predictable, and it's got a nicer weight to it actually, mid-corner particularly, than the Kia, which has got quite inconsistent steering weight like I mentioned. Do you know what, it surprises me a bit, because I mean, I think Kia's really nice to drive. It feels like kind of a proper sports executive in its own way, but actually I'm going to say that the steering is a bit more talkative and a little bit more engaging in the Model Y. So you've got your chill mode, of course, which is also become another something of a Tesla feature, hasn't it? So you've got chill, it's more than fast enough even in chill mode, and you've got 3 different steering modes: your comfort, your standard and your sport. I quite like steering on the standard. Even in sport the steering's not too heavy, and it wouldn't be a fair comparison if I didn't mention the Tesla autopilot system. This car, I will say it right now, is not a self-driving car. It might be in the future with the necessary software upgrades and changes to the law. Right now it is not a self-driving car, and Tesla will tell you that as well. Anyway, it is pretty much the best semi-autonomous drive mode out there, and let's not sort of talk it down for that. Tesla's really led the way, and it's really impressive. Very smooth in the way it cuts in. Sometimes it gets a bit hypersensitive about a car that's up ahead of you, that you're driving around and it doesn't think you're going to, but it is really impressive. So that's the semi-autonomous drive modes. We haven't mentioned brake regen yet, which is worth mentioning, because Tesla's got 3 different modes. Most of them are actually quite moderate, I think. Certainly you don't get the variety that you get with the EV6, and you don't get quite as strong regen as you get with the EV6 in its i-pedal, sort of one-pedal drive mode that it has. But do you know what? It's very intuitive, and I think that it's really easy to get used to. If anything, it's easier to get used to the regen in the Tesla than it is in the Kia, but certainly it's there. So, which one is best? Well, the Kia does feel more reassuringly like a normal car if you find the Tesla all a bit too futuristic. More than that, it's comparably good value, and it's also more comfortable, quieter, and yet practical enough to be your family car as well as your executive commuter. The Tesla, meanwhile, well, that performance, the practicality it offers, and the level of equipment that you get as standard, it's easy to see why this is likely to be a seriously popular car. If we could give the win here to both of these, we would, since it feels like both offer fairly different experiences and do it brilliantly. But that's a bit of a cop-out, right? So, if it were our money, well, we'd be taking the Kia. Head to cargurus.co.uk for loads of advice on buying and running an electric car, and of course for a whole host of fantastic used cars from top-rated dealers.